Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Justin here. As always, guys, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with me today for another What I've Been Watching video. I do these videos every month where I talk about every movie and TV show that I watched in that month. Not always horror, it's not just one genre, but it's a great way for you guys to sift through everything and get some good movie recommendations and maybe some things to stay away from. So that's the purpose of today's video. I do this, like I said, every month, what I've been watching, and we're gonna talk about what I watched in December. I watched a lot of good stuff. Before we jump into that, just really quickly, I started a new channel. New year, new channel. For those of you who have been watching the channel for a while, you guys know that I do talk about a lot of physical media and toys and collectibles, you know, all the things like boglins and figures and all that stuff. All of the collecting aspects of my content, I'm shifting over to the new channel, The Deach Couch. I've already posted my top 20 4K and Blu-ray releases of 2021. I posted my top 10 Vinegar Syndrome releases of 2021. And also I dropped a brand new Blu-ray and horror haul. So there's 3 videos on the new channel. I'll link that channel down below. It'd mean the world to me if you went over. If you're into physical media and collecting, go subscribe to that channel. I'll still continue to post on both channels. So movie watch ain't going nowhere. We're still going to be talking about all the best in streaming and theatrical movies, movie news. Going to keep that going. The only thing that's changing is the super niche collecting stuff that's going to be on that channel. So to anybody who listened to my little rant here without skipping, thank you very much. And let's go ahead and dive into everything that I watched in December. Everything that me and Pete watched, because he watches with me. I watched a bunch of good stuff, more so than I have in the last couple months as far as these videos, so we're gonna dive into these titles. Some I have talked about on other videos before, but we're just gonna dive into it. The first movie I watched in December was Summer of '84. I'm actually really excited about the release from Vinegar Syndrome. I think it's actually Gunpowder and Sky. It's one of Vinegar Syndrome's partner labels, released an amazing 4K edition of this movie, so I can't wait to check that out. But this is a great movie, guys. If you guys are into sort of the coming of age style horror movie in the vein of, like, I don't know, The Goonies or Stand By Me or Stranger Things, where you have a group of kids trying to get together to solve something that's bigger than them, bigger than the whole neighborhood. And in this case, it's a potential child murderer in their neighborhood. So weird things start happening. This group of kids gets together and they try to figure out who it is. It also has, it reminded me a lot of, what was the Shia LaBeouf movie back in the day that was really popular? Sort of similar to that. I highly recommend Summer of '84 if you haven't seen it. Great little movie. Next up is 1985's Savage Dawn. A vicious biker gang takes over a small town in Arizona. A Vietnam War vet passing through the town and a few locals with nothing to lose go to war with the gang's ruthless leader. Guys, I really didn't care for this movie a whole lot. I gave it 2 out of 5. In fact, I pulled this movie off the shelf. I had bought the Blu-ray a while back and I just hadn't got around to watching it. I watched it. It was a one-time watch for me. Just not enough going on. It's really slow moving. It's very low budget and grimy and gritty, which I usually like, but the substance was just not there. A better version of this movie, if I had to compare it to something, would be something like Roadhouse. This movie came out before Roadhouse, but Savage Dawn, it just has so many slow moments and so much of just not going on. The juice really isn't worth the squeeze with the 102-minute runtime.
With a little juice. No, we think the juice.
I gave it 2 stars out of 5. I wouldn't recommend it. Sorry to say. Next up, Ghostbusters 2016. I did a full review on Ghostbusters 2016. I gave it 2 stars. It's not the worst piece of shit I've ever seen, but it's not the best piece of shit I've ever seen. It's just kind of a piece of shit. Oh man. I gave, if you look at my full review on Letterboxd here, it just says fart noise. Full review down below. So I didn't give this a very good Letterboxd review, but I have to admit, in my personal opinion, in my video review, I gave that movie a very fair shake, and I gave it probably more credit than it deserved. I didn't like the movie, but I didn't shred it. I didn't call it garbage trash like a lot of reviewers did. I gave it a fair shot. So watch my review, but I didn't care for it. I wouldn't recommend it. 2 stars on Ghostbusters 2016. A movie I did love and that I would recommend is Encanto. I went and saw this with my sister and my niece. We loved it. We had a great time. The animation is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's got a great story. It doesn't have a traditional sort of big bad or villain character. All of the problems that arise, all the challenges that our main character, Mirabelle, has to solve are problems within herself. And it's like a kind of a self finding yourself type of journey. It's a really beautiful movie. I loved it. I would definitely recommend it if you're into the animated stuff, if you have kids. If you have kids, you probably already watched it, but I gave that one 3.5 stars for Encanto. Next up, Krampus from 2015. I gave it 3 stars. When I first saw this movie, I got to admit, the first time I watched it, I wasn't the biggest fan of Krampus, but I think knowing that it was Mike Dougherty as the writer-director, he's the guy who did Trick or Treat, so I just expected a R-rated, trick-or-treat style version of a movie in a Christmas style, but that's not what it is. That's not to say that it's not a Christmas horror movie. It is, but it's much more of a gateway horror movie. It's much more tame than I was expecting. I almost wish that it would have been the Trick or Treat of Christmas, that hard R-rated version, but I liked it a lot more this time around, and I think as I watch it every year around Christmas, my appreciation for this movie is going to grow and grow. Watching some interviews with the director, he really did just want to make that sort of Gremlins, kid horror, gateway horror movie that somebody young can see and maybe set them on a track for being a horror fan. So I give a nice, pretty lengthy review on Letterboxd. I would definitely recommend Krampus. Next up is Silent Night. This movie is very, very interesting. In fact, I wish I would have done a full review for this one. I did a lengthy, in-depth review on Letterboxd. I gave it 3 stars. The entire hook of this movie, if I told you, it would just ruin it for you. I went into this movie knowing absolutely nothing about the plot, and I will say within the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, what am I watching here? I don't want to watch this type of movie. Then the hook kicks in, and then you're like, oh, holy shit, we're going there. Okay, I see what you're doing here, Silent Night. But it's got a really dark, bleak premise with some good performances. I will say there's a lot of sections, especially in the center, that lag a little bit, that sort of loses the focus a little bit with interpersonal drama. That's kind of what the movie's about, but then definitely at the end, it sort of finds its way back and it's got a strong finish. It's a really interesting movie. I know I'm being really vague, I just don't want to ruin it. Letterboxd described it as, Nell, Simon, and their boy Art are ready to welcome friends and family for what they promise to be a perfect Christmas gathering. Perfect except for one thing. And I'm going to stop right there. If you read into the premise, if you watch the trailer, it might give it away. I would go in as cold as possible for Silent Night, which I would recommend. Next up, Dr. Sleep. This was a rewatch for me. I love Dr. Sleep. This is a Mike Flanagan film. He's done most recently Midnight Mass, and he did The Haunting of Bly Manor, Haunting of Hill House, Oculus, which was another throwback of his. But this was a really slept-on movie that I feel like I wish more people would give a chance to. Obviously, you can't recreate The Shining. This is a sequel to The Shining. It doesn't try to reinvent the wheel, and it doesn't try to be a direct sequel to The Shining, although it is. It's a completely different story, but for the fans of Shining, there is a lot of Easter eggs, and there's some definitely, especially towards the end of the movie, if you're a Shining fan, it definitely gives that fan service. I don't want to spoil any surprises if you don't know, but if you are a fan of The Shining, this only builds upon the lore and it only builds upon the greatness of the original Shining movie, and I definitely recommend this. It's way better than it had any credit to be, and that's because Mike Flanagan is so good with story and suspense and character work and a lot of deep personal things that he puts into his movies. It's great. Definitely see Dr. Sleep. Next up is 2021's Nightmare Alley, written and directed by Guillermo del Toro. This movie did land in my top 10 of the year. I did a full review for it, so you can check that out. This movie is still in theaters to my knowledge. It didn't do very well. It was just buried underneath Spider-Man's weight. So if you can, go check this out in the theaters. This is an absolutely beautiful movie directed by Guillermo del Toro. Like I said, he's got such an amazing eye for cinematography, especially period pieces, and this movie takes place way back in the day. I want to say it's in the 20s or 30s. This is this sort of like horror, neo-noir, thriller, suspense, mystery movie. Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Willem Dafoe, Rooney Mara. It's fantastic. Check out my full review. Next up, I watched every single Silent Night, Deadly Night movie so that you didn't have to. I did a full video covering every movie and ranking every movie in the Silent Night Deadly series. You can check that out. I'll link that down below. All these movies are wildly different. When you start out with the first one, which is a guy sort of mentally fucked up from seeing his parents get murdered, then he turns into a killer Santa. That thread continues with that original character's little brother, and then once it goes to 3, 4, and 5, the movies have nothing to do with the 2 original movies, and It's a ride. It was quite a ride. Check out my video. I had a lot of fun making that, sort of doing a retrospective on the entire series. And those movies get fucking weird, man. Holy shit. That is the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. All 5 movies. I'll link my reviews down below. Next up, 2021's Don't Look Up, starring everybody. Jennifer Lawrence, Leonardo DiCaprio, Meryl Streep, Jonah Hill, Cate Blanchett, Tyler Perry, Timothée Chalamet, Ariana Grande, Ron Perlman. The premise reads here, 2 low-level astronomers, upon discovering that a meteor will strike the Earth in 6 months, go on a media tour to try to warn the world, but find an unreceptive and unbelieving populace. Basically, with this movie, you have Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence trying to tell the world that the world is going to come to an end. There's a catastrophic extinction level event that's about to happen and nobody gives a shit. Everybody's trying to figure out how they can monetize it. The president gets together with like an Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos character, and they try to like monetize this event. Nobody gives a shit, and the world's literally getting ready to end. It's very satirical, it's very topical, it's very heavy-handed in its messaging, but a lot of what they say is true, for sure. I could definitely see some of the things that happen in this movie happening in real life, which is kind of scary. But if you like all those performers, it does have an interesting take on end of world catastrophes that could potentially happen, and it makes you think. It's just annoying. I keep on hearing people talk about this movie, so many circles, like movie review podcast and channels, calling this movie important. This movie's important. It's not an important movie. It's a satire about a meteor hitting the Earth, which, yes, has important issues, but this movie in itself is not important, okay? It's Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence in a satirical comedy directed by the guy who directed Step Brothers, okay? It is funny, it has its moments. Jonah Hill is pretty good in it, but this movie isn't important. It's definitely worth a watch. It's just not gonna change the world like Adam McKay acts like it's going to. And finally, last on the list is Titane. Now this movie, this is an important movie. No, it's not important, but it is a fantastic movie. It's important because of its originality. We have original filmmakers taking original ideas and putting them up on the screen. This movie is very crazy, very out there. It is not going to be for everyone. This movie has a very surrealistic Cronenbergian body horror tone to it. The beginning of the movie, there's a car accident and this little girl bashes her head and she gets a small section of her skull replaced with a titanium plate that's still sort of like kind of visible on her head. You can see a big scar. And we'll just say that that event changed the entire course of her life to the point where she is doing extremely perverted, weird sexual shit, extremely violent shit. That's really as far as I'm gonna go as far as explaining this movie, because it's just too bizarre. And again, if you get too deep into the plot, it's gonna go into spoilers. I recommend going into this movie as cold as possible, but just keep in mind, this movie is not going to be for everyone. This is for, I would say, like cinephiles and true horror fans. If you're not gonna be, you don't wanna be offended by weird body horror or violence that's gonna take you out of this movie. So if you're into crazy fucked up movies, you will dig Titane, I assure you. And guys, that is it for my What I Watched in December video. I hope you guys enjoyed these titles. I hope you guys got some good recommendations. Go ahead and subscribe to the new channel, The Dead Couch, for physical media and collecting. I'll link that down below if this is your first time here and you're still here. Thanks for watching my videos. I do this every month and I have plenty of movie reviews and movie news coming up soon. So guys, I think we're done here. Stay weird. Remember to always be yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.